Cat 2 mock exam mark scheme analysis. So the grade boundaries, to get a pass you needed 20, to get a merit you needed 34, and to get a distinction you needed 49, and the maximum, it was out of 80. So RNA is a nucleic acid. Figure 1 shows the structure of an RNA nucleotide. Identify X in figure 1. So that is a ribose sugar because it's RNA. It's got to be ribose. If it was DNA, it would be deoxyribose, because it's RNA, it's ribose sugar. Describe how a molecule of messenger RNA or mRNA is made in the nucleus of a cell. So, messenger RNA is made in the process of transcription, and this is where the DNA will unwind and the hydrogen bonds will break, and that is done by DNA helicase, and then RNA polymerase binds to the DNA, and free nucleotides are added to base pairs with the DNA template strand by complementary base pairing. So transcription unwinds the hydrogen bonds by DNA helicase, then RNA polymerase binds to the DNA, and then RNA nucleotides are added or base paired with the DNA template strand. mRNA is used to build polypeptide chains in a process called translation. Name the organelle where the process of translation happens. Well, translation is the second part of protein synthesis, which happens at the ribosomes. The process of translation uses transfer RNA or tRNA. Figure 2 shows a molecule of tRNA. Explain the function of region Y in figure 2. Well, region Y is the anticodon. This here would be the amino acid binding site, so that's an amino acid. But here is the anticodon, which will bind to the complementary codon on the mRNA. So, there's an anticodon. Y is an anticodon, which is complementary to the codons on mRNA, and therefore it binds to the codon on mRNA, and it brings a specific amino acid for each specific sequence. So anticodon, complementary to the mRNA codon, so it binds to that mRNA codon, and it is specific for a particular amino acid. Allergens are substances that can cause an allergic reaction. During an allergic reaction, histamine is released. Which type of cell releases histamine? It is mast cells. Exposure to allergens can trigger an asthma attack. Explain what happens to the body during an asthma attack. So, the airways become inflamed or swollen or constricted or narrow because the smooth muscle contracts. Therefore, the person has trouble breathing, or wheezes or coughs, or experiences tightness in the chest. There's less oxygen available to the cells, or less aerobic respiration, or less gas exchange. Also, there is increased mucus production, which obviously further restricts the airways. Give one treatment for an asthma attack. So an inhaler or a nebulizer would be the most obvious one, but you could also say steroids. Skin contact with an allergen can cause dermatitis. Give 2 symptoms of dermatitis. So any 2 from itchiness, dry or flaking skin, blisters, discoloration of the skin or redness or a rash, or you could have swelling or thickened skin. The body responds to injury in many ways. Injury to the body may cause hyperplasia. Explain the effects of hyperplasia. So, hyper means an increase. Plasia means cells, so cell numbers increase. So number of cells increase in hyperplasia. And this is because there's a change in the cell cycle or increased mitosis or uncontrolled cell division. This can cause the organ to enlarge or swell and replace damaged tissue, and it could cause the growth of tumours or cancer. Explain how blood loss is stopped when the skin is cut. So, there is contact between platelets and damaged tissue, which causes the platelets to break open. There is also a release of serotonin. The blood vessels will contract to reduce blood flow to the skin, which is called vasoconstriction. Thromboplastin is released, and this thromboplastin catalyses the conversion of prothrombin to thrombin. So thrombin catalyses the conversion of fibrinogen to fibrin. So you've got thromboplastin's released, converts prothrombin to thrombin, and thrombin catalyses fibrinogen to turn to fibrin. And fibrin fibres strengthen the platelet plug. And insoluble fibres form a mesh over the wound. Platelets and blood cells get caught in this mesh and a blood clot forms. Then the fibres in the platelets contract, which forms a tougher blood clot, and then a scab forms to cover the wound, which makes a physical barrier. Autoimmune disorders happen when the body's immune system attacks its own cells. Name an autoimmune disorder. So you could have rheumatoid arthritis, diabetes type 1, multiple sclerosis, and Crohn's disease. Chemotherapy targets dividing cells and can be used as a treatment for some autoimmune disorders. Explain one advantage and one disadvantage of using chemotherapy to treat autoimmune disorders. So, advantage: chemotherapy prevents growth of or damages dividing cells. White blood cells are prevented from developing, or fewer or no white blood cells are available to attack the body. Disadvantage is that the immune system is immunocompromised, or the immune system becomes weakened. Therefore, the person is more likely to be infected by pathogens, and it may damage or destroy healthy cells or other body cells. And it could cause unwanted side effects like hair loss, fatigue, and nausea. Antibody production is part of the immune response. Name the type of white blood cell that produces antibodies. So it is the B lymphocytes or B cells. Figure 3 shows the structure of an antibody. Explain how region Z in figure 3 is adapted to its function. So first of all, you'd say that, part Z is the variable region, and it is different between each antibody. It's specific, and at the top is the antigen binding site. So there's 2 antigen binding sites. So what that means is at the hinge region, 2 antigens can be clumped together to form agglutinate, to agglutinate the bacterial pathogen together. So this region Z is called the variable region, and there are antigen binding sites which are complementary in shape to the antigen, and the antibody is specific for each antigen or each pathogen. Mutations are changes in the DNA sequence. Figure 4 shows 2 DNA sequences. So this is the original DNA sequence, this is the mutated DNA sequence. So you can see here that the A has been swapped for a T. Name the type of mutation shown in figure 4. Well, because it's swapped, it's a substitution mutation, because the A has been swapped for a T. Which disease can be caused by mutation in an oncogene? It would be cancer is caused by mutation in the oncogene. Mutations can be either hereditary or acquired. Explain what is meant by the terms hereditary mutation and acquired mutation. So, a hereditary mutation affects the germline, or it can be passed on to the offspring. It can be inherited from the parents. It can be passed on to the offspring. Hereditary mutation is a change in the gamete or sex cell, so therefore it will be present in all cells of the offspring. An acquired mutation is not passed on to the offspring, and it is a change in a single somatic or body cell, and it happens after conception or later in life. Amniocentesis can be used to screen a fetus for genetic disorders. Describe how amniocentesis is done. So, amniocentesis is where a needle is placed into the amniotic fluid, and a sample of the amniotic fluid is taken, and it has to happen between 15 and 20 weeks of pregnancy. So a long thin needle is inserted through the abdomen using ultrasound to guide it, and then the needle passes into the amniotic sac surrounding the fetus, and a sample of fluid is collected. So, the process of amniocentesis: the needle is inserted through the abdomen into the amniotic sac, guided by ultrasound. A sample is taken from the amniotic fluid, and then the fetal DNA from the fluid is examined. So the DNA is examined for abnormalities. Question 6. A balanced diet is needed for a healthy body. Vitamins are part of a balanced diet. Table 1 shows the role of 2 vitamins in the body. Complete Table 1 to show the missing vitamins. Now, there's a big difference between vitamins and minerals. So a lot of people put calcium for bone development. Well, calcium is actually a mineral, not a vitamin. So for healthy bone development, you need vitamin D, because without vitamin D, people can get a symptom called rickets, which is where they have bowed legs because their bones don't develop properly. So you need vitamin D for healthy bone development. And to help blood clotting during injury is vitamin K. Minerals are also part of the balanced diet. Identify the mineral used to carry oxygen in hemoglobin. Well, hemoglobin contains Fe2 plus group or iron groups. So it is iron, which is why if you have anemia, you have a lack of iron, which means you're tired because you can't carry as much oxygen because you can't form as much hemoglobin. Some athletes take dietary supplements to increase their daily intake of a nutrient. One example of a dietary supplement is a protein shake. The nutritional information for 2 different protein shakes is given in Table 2. Evaluate which shake in Table 2 would be better for a competitive swimmer to take to help improve their performance. So this is a 9-mark question. So shake A has more calories, so they need to be comparative, these statements. So shake A has more calories or contains more energy per 100 grams. It has more carbohydrates. All the carbohydrates are present as sugar, so the energy is released faster. There is more fat, which is beneficial for long-term energy requirements. However, there is less protein, so they're less able to build muscle and increase strength. On the other hand, shake B has fewer calories, contain less energy per 100 grams. They have less carbohydrates overall. They have a lower proportion of these carbohydrates are stored as sugars, so that means there's a slower release of energy. There is less fat, but there is more protein, which is beneficial for building muscle. And then once you've compared them, you need to put a conclusion. So in conclusion, either shake A would be better for providing energy or calories per 100 grams and a greater amount of fat and carbohydrates. Shake B would be better for building muscle as it contains more protein. And then some just general things. Shakes are supplements, so they should accompany a balanced diet. And which shake is better would depend on what area the person wants to improve. Like if they wanted to improve their muscle, they would be taking shake B because it's got more protein. If they wanted to increase their energy release, they would take shake A. Question 7. Human cells are surrounded by a cell surface membrane. Different components of the cell surface membrane have different functions. Which component controls cell membrane fluidity? So it is cholesterol, because cholesterol gives the membrane its strength and stability. So without that, without the cholesterol, it would become more fluid. State one function of glycoproteins in the cell surface membrane: cell signalling or cell recognition. The cell surface membrane controls which substances can enter and leave the cell. Explain how oxygen and amino acids travel across the cell surface membrane. So oxygen is a small or non-polar molecule, and therefore it will travel directly across the membrane. You don't need carrier proteins by simple diffusion. Whereas amino acids are large and not lipid soluble, therefore they need carrier or channel proteins, so therefore it would be facilitated diffusion, or you could say active transport if it's going against its concentration gradient. Exocytosis is a bulk transport process that releases substances from the cell. Explain how. So exocytosis is where substances exit the cell or are excreted from the cell into the surroundings. So substances are packaged into vesicles. The vesicles are transported to the cell surface membrane. The vesicles fuse with the cell surface membrane, and this process requires ATP, or energy. Question C. The cell surface membrane contains sodium-potassium pumps. If there is no oxygen, the sodium-potassium pumps in the cell surface membrane do not function properly. This can cause the cell to swell and increase in size. Figure 5 shows a sodium-potassium pump in the cell surface membrane. Explain how lack of oxygen can cause the cell to swell. So, a lack of oxygen means that the cell cannot respire. Therefore, less energy or ATP is given off. There is an influx of sodium into the cell. The osmotic potential of the cell increases, or the water potential of the cell decreases. I'd probably go for that one. The water potential of the cell decreases because sodium has been pumped in. Water moves into the cell by osmosis because of the lower water potential. Question 8. The lungs are adapted for gas exchange. Figure 6 is a diagram of the lungs. Identify the structure labelled Q on figure 6. So Q is the trachea. Structure Q is surrounded by rings of cartilage. State the function of the cartilage surrounding the structure Q. It is to hold open the airway, or to allow air into the lungs, or to support the airways open. So to hold the airways open is the cartilage rings. Air travels into the lungs because of the action of the diaphragm and intercostal muscles. Identify the action of the diaphragm and intercostal muscles when breathing in. So when you breathe in, you can actually feel it. The rib cage moves up and out, and that is because the intercostal muscles contract and the diaphragm moves down. So the intercostal muscles contract, which cause the rib cage to move up and out. The diaphragm contracts and moves down, and therefore the volume of the thorax increases, which decreases the pressure, which causes air to flow in. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD, is a disease that causes decreased lung capacity. Table 3 shows the forced expiratory volume of a patient with COPD compared with the predicted normal value. So the patient with COPD has a forced expiratory volume of 2.45. Predicted normal value is 5.2. Calculate the patient's percentage decrease in forced expiratory volume from the predicted normal value. So, to get percentage changed, it is the old number minus the new number over the old number times by 100, or final minus initial over initial times by 100. So you're doing the difference over the original times by 100. So you get a mark for doing 5.20 minus 2.45 to get the difference. And then you get a mark for dividing the difference over the original value. And then a mark for timesing that by 100 to get a percentage. So your answer should be 53. Figure 7 shows the structure of the alveoli and an alveolus. Describe how alveoli are adapted for efficient gas exchange, for 9 marks. So remember that alveoli have a large surface area because there's lots of them. They're very numerous. There's like 300 million of them, which gives a large surface area. They are thin. They have thin walls which are only 1 cell thick, which provides a short diffusion pathway. They have a large capillary network, which means that there is a constant diffusion gradient because it's a steep diffusion gradient because the capillaries are constantly taking oxygenated blood away and carbon dioxide rich blood to the alveoli. So key things: large surface area, short diffusion pathway, good blood supply to provide a steep diffusion gradient. So there is a large number of alveoli in the lungs. This creates a large surface area for gas exchange. They have a spherical shape of each alveolus, so each alveolus has a large surface area to volume ratio. The alveoli is prevented from collapsing by the presence of a surfactant, which is a layer of moisture produced by the cells in the walls of the alveoli. Because if the alveoli stuck together, that would reduce the surface area for gas exchange. There is a good blood supply to the lungs, created by a large network of capillaries. There is a flow of blood to maintain steep concentration gradient to increase the rate of diffusion. The walls of the alveoli are 1 cell thick, or the squamous or pavement epithelium are only 1 cell thick. Thin endothelium of the capillaries, so they're close to the alveoli, so there's a very short diffusion distance for gases, which increases the efficiency of diffusion. So, a few reflections about the mock exam. Remember, your real exam is on Thursday, the 26th of May, which is a week on Thursday. Complete the forms quiz to reflect on how ready you are for this exam.